Thanks for joining me on this session of the AI Roundtable. And I'd love to have a quick introduction about yourself. Previously you started off as a software developer before moving into data science, and then more recently in leading data science and also AI product management. So could you run me through how your career journey has been like for yourself?
Sure. First of all, Cheryl, thanks for having me here, and really happy to share my journey today. So in terms of how I started, my initial role was being an application developer for an investment bank back in India. That's how I started my career. And initial goal was to try and move towards something like quantitative finance was my drive, where the goal is to find more patterns from data, but more in the world of finance. But from then on, I decided to do something more broader, where you can apply the same concepts of finding patterns from data and applying it to any industry, be it manufacturing, be it FMCG, be it consumer, any industry you can apply. And that's where I sort of driven my career after. So I came to NUS to do my master's about 10 years ago. And after that, I've been in Singapore working for companies like HP, Mercedes-Benz, Inchcape, and most recently at Hyundai.
Okay. So how's the journey been like? Moving from application developer, right, and then into data science, and what are some of the challenges that you face when you try to implement like something kind of new to the industry in a sense?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So if you see how data science, like now data science and AI is the in thing, right? So everyone wants to have that as a career. But when I started about 10 years ago, you typically had two groups of people. So one was the computer software people trying to get into data science. The second group was the statisticians, the usual PhD kind of people who have a research-centric background. They then go into data science. And data science also evolved in a big way, right? So initially it was more on the research and R&D side. And now I think with the rise of LLMs and the last 3 or 4 years, it's been largely on the application side. So to be honest, like my background in computer science has really helped me. So I think data scientists now are expected to also build production level code. They're expected to be software savvy, because at the end of the day, whatever you build in your company is going to go into some piece of software. So having that strong software knowledge would help you over time. And I think I usually say this, like, Steve Jobs said in Stanford Muslim speech about how the dots connect backwards. Right? So you don't generally plan your career, but if I think back, like I feel the career I've had in terms of starting from computer science and moving to data science has really helped me in terms of my growth.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And I'm curious to find out more towards like the area of application, because where your career background has been on, right? It's more towards like implementing data science or AI as a product. So how has your journey been like in terms of like having it deployed in a real world environment, and what are some of the key or most interesting stories that you have throughout your career from there?
Yeah, I think if you see how things started, like just sort of building on my previous answer, right? So
yeah,
the goal was more statistics-based people and software-based people. But over time, like enterprises realized that it's important to also not just build the algorithm, but also see how you can create some change with it, right? And this sort of led me to product management. And most of my experience in this is largely when I was working for Inchcape as the group head of data science and AI. So there, I think we implemented a very interesting approach towards AI, where we wanted to build a lot of products and also see how you can implement it end to end. Right. And the goal and this change in mindset towards product management is quite interesting. And largely because if you see about algorithms, right, you build something and then it does not have a face to it, does not have a way to really create that value and visibility to the enterprise. So usually in enterprises, dashboards are very common, right? That clearly has a face to it. But if you think about an algorithm and think about it separately, it does not have that kind of a view in terms of creating that impact. But when you think about a product that has end-to-end, it has data, it has the algorithm, which is the logic. It also has other elements around how do you integrate it with the business and enterprise. So the end-to-end aspect of it is very interesting. And then this mindset also helps you to think about like a product development lifecycle, right? So you think about something that you start, then it matures over time, and also over time you sort of move to a different version or a different product altogether. So that cycle is also very clear. Life cycle is very clear. So that really makes the AI as a product is a very interesting approach, rather than thinking about it only as an algorithm.
That sounds pretty broad and a lot of convincing to do, especially for, let's say, if you have to present your product to major stakeholders, right? Well, and it will be rather difficult for them to understand if you are unable to explain the full life cycle to them. So from the beginning of the journey, what was the biggest challenges in trying to convince them to take up AI as a product?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. So I think if you think about enterprises, the major goal is how do you convince your stakeholders in terms of for them to adopt your product, right? So the approach we took an Inchcape, and this is something I've carried in all my career after, is to think about adoption. Right? Adoption of products is probably more important than the complexity or the how pure is your algorithm in a way that you're trying to make it mathematically complex, right? So adoption is the key. So you think about what is easy for people to take and adopt, have that as a priority, and that will help create more value than building something that is really cool, right? So it's about how do you really balance these two buckets. And when it comes to senior stakeholders, they understand the business language very well. So as data scientists, typically you end up talking about AUC, talking about all the metrics that you build as a scientist. But when it comes to managing stakeholders, it's important to translate that to a business metric. So for example, if I build a churn prediction algorithm, ultimately the goal is to improve my AUC, that's right. But I should also see what benefit it's bringing on the business, right? How many customers have I able to retain, right? And what kind of approach am I getting from that? So it's about translating these metrics to more business level metrics and then talking to stakeholders after, because that really gives you the power to create that change. Okay, so you should, as any data practitioner, AI practitioner, your goal is not only to build something, but also to drive that change. And once you have that mindset towards driving that change, then your whole stakeholder management becomes a lot easier because you start thinking more business-like rather than thinking more on the data side.
Okay, so this is more towards a curious question. With so many enterprises, like be it startups, SME, or even MNCs, AI has been a buzzword for the past 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. And everyone has been trying to implement AI as a solution into their company. How do you think that would be the best way to implement AI as a solution into the company?
I think it's quite a big question to answer. So, right. To me, I think if I have to take a very first principle-based approach, right? So the goal with any AI in any company should start from data. Right? So you should see how good is the data infrastructure, how good are your foundations in your company. That's the first layer. And the second layer is skill set. So skill sets can mean someone within your company having the skill set, or it can also mean hiring people to match that skill set, right? So when you think about AI, you don't think about one product or one software or one function for that matter. It's about the transformation across multiple functions. So for example, if you're building something for sales in your company, only the sales function, if it adopts it, will not be fully successful. Your marketing should also be playing a part. Your finance should also be playing a part. And your R&D should also be playing a part. So everyone should really play a part in the entire value chain for you to create that transformational value from AI. Okay. So more often than not, enterprises try to think about it as purely as hiring a chief data scientist or hiring a chief data officer and expecting that will create all the change you need in the company. But that's really unfortunate and it's very shallow in my opinion. So you should try and think about it more from how do you really have all the enablers in place, right? And the change management is also super important. I cannot stress more on that. So having that right people and change mindset is also very important. So with AI, you're not just building a software or building a solution, you're trying to change that mindset within the company and enterprise. And that takes time. So you have to do step by step, you have to do a lot of efforts across the board upskilling, reskilling, also literacy. AI literacy is very important. And apart from that, you should also ensure the transformation is going forward. So it's a lot of things to do, to be honest.
That sounds like a very tall order, but honestly, I think a lot of our enterprises have been investing heavily in terms of AI literacy and also the change management, as you mentioned. So very fun stuff that's ongoing. Let's move into AI as a innovation hub in Singapore. What's your take on it? Like, do you think we are innovators, or do you think we're more of consumers in this current time in 2025 within Singapore?
Yeah, I think so. I've worked in Singapore for close to 10 years. And if you see the evolution of AI within Singapore, right? So when I started my career in HP, like if you can, in LLMs, there's an interesting article from McKinsey where they talk about LLMs as a maker and LLM as a taker, LLM as builder, right? You have these three concepts. So if you think about AI as a builder, that has slowly been reducing in Singapore. Not across all enterprises, because most of them are consuming what you get from the LLMs. So the chat GPTs of today are quite good in terms of what it can do. So most enterprises are keen to adopt what is available rather than build everything from scratch, right? So the amount of foundation work if you think about it, that has unfortunately reduced. And largely because the capability of these models have become quite good in the last 3 or 4 years, then you don't have to build everything from scratch per se, right? But the real value in AI in enterprises now, and this is where like all the innovation happening, is around how do you build not just use cases, but really build products in your companies that they can drive the transformation, right? So it's not about building the best model anymore. It's about how do you consume the best model and how do you take it forward with the right use case and create value to your company. That's what really matters.
Thanks for sharing. And in your opinion, right, how do you think we have been successful in terms of using AI as a product in a business model so far?
I think it's been a mixed bag in my opinion. So it's largely because if you see, I also divide enterprises into 2 buckets, right? So one is the digital native enterprises, companies like Grab, companies like in Singapore, if you think about Carousel, for example. These are companies where they started with a very digital native approach. So you have an app, you have a website, and it's more easier to track every aspect of your application. But you also have more traditional enterprises, where I come from, more automotive companies, for example. They have existed even before the AI boom, before the digital boom itself. So there you have some challenges around how do you translate the current aspect. First, digitizing everything is important. That's the first challenge. And then after that, you can build the AI aspect of it, right? But when it comes to digital native companies, they've been doing really well in terms of what products and applications they can do. So, and this is where they are really, I think, good in terms of applying it and giving it to the consumer as well. Okay. So, for example, I think one of the really products I like is from Grab, right? And they really try and do around, they start with search pricing, and now they're also expanding to like a finance product as well. And they are also expanding to other areas that they can do, like more on the food and dining side as well. So you can really expand your scope in terms of what you can do with data. And that's how you grow the business. So data can also be, data and AI can also not necessarily be a way to only build products, but can also be a revenue generator by expanding the growth, right? So that's an interesting view. And then in enterprises, the challenge is because the fact that you have still digitalization happening. So it's not fully that easy to make that big change in enterprises. And the other aspect is also culture, right? So if you see in enterprises, the cultural element and the resistance around using AI products is not that, is quite high. And that makes it harder to make that leap in terms of change. But it's easier in digital native companies because you typically have young teams and you're able to make that change rather quickly. And you can also validate with data very quickly as well. So that's the kind of difference I see between these two.
Thanks for sharing. You're answering all my curious questions. Yeah, but I have to agree with you. There's a huge difference between a digital native enterprise versus like a traditional or conventional enterprise, whereby digitalization is still actively happening.
Yeah.
They are slowly moving. Challenges is always there in firstly getting companies fully digitalized, having all those data not on-prem storage, but moving to
Yes.
cloud hybrid kind of
You have to do the
storage.
cloud transformation first, and then you have to think about the next leap around AI and data science. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a very interesting perspective, and perhaps there will be more widely discussed about from an enterprise level about how quickly we can adopt and digitalize even faster. But let's move into the next area, which is AI career acceleration journey. Like you have been having a rather fast acceleration in terms of your career development from senior data scientist to leading an entire group and into strategizing and road mapping.
Yeah.
Like, how do you navigate across the AI career acceleration?
I think to be honest, I've been fortunate to be the right side of the wave in terms of the AI wave that's happened, and it's been a quite fulfilling career for me in terms of what I've been able to do so far. And it also comes down to thinking about a very fundamental skill with AI, right? So and also reframing what you can do, right? So if you think about traditionally in most jobs and most JDs, for example, you have a box around what you can do, right? So you become a consumer research person, you become a HR person, you become a marketing person, and you try and grow within that same function in a way. But with AI, data science, the beauty is data is ubiquitous. You can try and apply it across different functions. And you can also create value across multiple functions as well. And for me, I think that is critical, right? So you as a data science person in your company, you should not just think about what use cases that come to you, but also think about where you can really create that change. Something I've done in my career more often than not is to really go and talk to people, understand where there's data, where I can create value. And this can be like as simple as analyzing survey data for HR, or this can be even a simple dashboard that you can do for marketing. But trying to go and giving that shot at different functions and applying your use cases and your skill sets there is really key, if you ask me, in terms of growth, right? And it's also something I mentioned before as well. So the ability to reframe your problem to a very business-centric approach, right? So if you want to grow in your career, at the end of the day, you have to be able to run a business or run a P&L, if you think about it. So having that mindset of data, managing data within all use cases that you have from a P&L-based approach is very important. Right, I recently did my MBA from INSEAD as well. And one of the reasons I did that was one is upskilling. And the other reason is also to have that more business conversations with the team so that I can apply my skills around AI in a more broader context and also help drive the transformation within enterprises.
Okay, thanks for sharing. And from a hiring perspective, right, in your current, not in your current, but more towards in your previous capacity as a group head of data science or even chief data scientist, right? What do you think are the most in-demand kind of talent profiles that you would want to have in your team, ideally?
I think it's a great question, and it's probably very important in this context as well, because you find a lot of AI talent in the market, but you very hard to find the right talent. So there is a lot of quantity, but the quality aspect of it is unfortunately quite limited. And the reason for this is sort of largely believe that most people try and again like sort of bring the initial aspect of having computer science background or having a business background or having some other background bringing together. So data, I think this is quite commonly documented as well. You have three sort of important things. One is domain expertise around what business you're working. And second is having a very strong computer science knowledge around coding, programming, things like that. And third is very strong mathematical knowledge. And if you go to the market and see, you typically find people who have two of the three, right? And it's very hard to find all three, right? And domain comes from experience from the industry. So this is the reason why it's very hard to find this kind of talent in the market. And something I look for is someone who's at least interested in the domain, who has some basic domain knowledge about where they're going. If you're applying for a manufacturing company, you should know what manufacturing process is, what is lean management is, for example. If you're applying to an FMCG, you should understand what is price pack architecture, what exactly are discounts that they do around FMCG. These are like basic domain knowledge you should know for you to navigate and get that role within the company. Okay, so if you ask me right now, people who are hybrid in terms of these skill sets are very valuable rather than having just one. Like I'm a computer science PhD. If you say, does not mean that you can do AI very well, right, within the company. That's a good skill set because you fill one box, but you need other two boxes as well. So it's very important to have all three.
I have to agree with you on this. I mean, it is definitely highly relevant, dependent on the kind of context or business use cases the data science team is being used for, especially if it's, example, within the finance industry or even the manufacturing industry where different regulations are in place, use cases and needs are in place. But in terms of skill sets wise, I have to agree with you that it only feels like a couple of boxes, one or two boxes. Example, a lot of challenges that we face in hiring within Singapore, typically they are only open to locals and PRs. I'm putting the opinion out there very openly. And challenges that we face, I mean, as a recruiter, right, from a hiring perspective, typically they do not check all the boxes. It's only generally about one or two maximum.
Yeah. I think that, and that's known, right? When you apply, when we draw up a JD or something, you never expect 100% match the JD, right? You try and do at least 70-80% of the match, and the rest 20% you hope that person can learn on the job. That's the usual thing. But I cannot stress the importance of domain, right? So far I've realized that the initial data science use cases were very high level, but now you see the data science use cases are going much into the processes, much into the operations of any domain that you're doing. So the expectation is you have a very good domain knowledge, and that really helps you to get the job. Yeah.
This moves into my next question about career transitioning. So let's say, if example, a person is in a manufacturing environment, they have some experience in digitalizing, but not that deep, in-depth knowledge about data science and AI. How easy is it for them to transit into a career of data science and AI?
Yeah, also very, very good question. So this sort of builds what I was saying earlier, right? So the domain knowledge is important. So something we used to do during my HP days was we try and upskill engineers within HP towards trying to get them more data science skills. So we are working with NUS, partnering with NUS to do this upskilling. And this was like a professional sort of conversion program, maybe, right? And the idea was you have the domain knowledge of engineering and manufacturing, you try and upskill them with something else, right? And if you think about digital talent in Singapore, you have, AI is growing so rapidly now that obviously the demand is quite high, but the supply is not that much. Like when I say supply is really good quality, supply is not that much. So then it's about how the current people in Singapore try and upskill themselves with different things. It can be like a short-term program, or it can be like learning programming, or it can be like solving some hackathon, things like that, to try and enable that, have that skill set to move towards AI way. And the beauty of AI is, I think I say this to everyone, most people try to make this AI data science quite a mystical thing that only a few handful people can do. But even if you have an Excel file, and if you do pivot tables, if you start from there, it's a good starting point. You just have to have the curiosity to try and dig through data and find that pattern, and that's very important. Once you have that curiosity in you, then you can definitely transition to an AI career. It's not super difficult, and that is very important, right? So you should have that, and it's also a very patient job as well. So you are not going to find that insight very quickly. So you have to be patient in digging through, patient in asking more questions, building more hypotheses, and finally getting that answer around whatever you're searching for. And that is, to me, is a very important skill set, the curiosity and the ability to learn. And it's also about the amount of change that's happening. Every 2 weeks, there's something new, right? So if you cannot expect, like I have a degree now and I have 10 years of experience and I'm an expert in AI. But every next 2 months there's be something new that you have to learn. So the ability to learn becomes key, and how quickly you can learn and adapt also becomes key. So given that you are constantly learning and constantly growing, and you have to be curious. These are two important characteristics I look for, even when people apply for roles, for them to get into the AI sector.
Hey, thanks for sharing. But I think like this is just a personal observation, but going back into what you were saying, right, about AI literacy, I think AI literacy will become more and more of a basic knowledge like in 5-10 years down the road, whereby everyone has to learn it in one way or another.
Yeah.
And
English.
But that's just my personal opinion. But to various degrees of literacy that we can rate it further down on, like example, the consumer side, they'll be more proficient in using all the prompt language to generate the ideal knowledge. And then from the curiosity side, it's more towards like the data literacy of on the statistical value, looking it over a table, identifying all the patterns, and then coming up with some implementation and solutions. So in terms of that, right, I'm curious to find out for all those mid-career changes, if you're hiring, you mentioned about the hackathons, programming, ideally from someone who do not come from AI or data science kind of background, but with the domain knowledge. If they were to build a personal portfolio for themselves, what's the ideal kind of portfolio that you would like to see? Like be it on GitHub or on the hackathons or HackerRanks?
Yeah. I think this is again where AI is very different, right? So 15 years ago, the opportunities on the publicly showcase your work was very limited. But with AI and data science, most of the innovations happened rather publicly, right? And you find a lot of interesting blogs, interesting innovation happening that you can easily try. And Singapore government also has a lot of good initiatives as well. So for example, you have Smart Nation initiative that gives you a lot of APIs that you can try. You can get data, you can do some analysis on your own, and you can present that and as a portfolio. Okay. So it's about like being more, it's not about the quantity when it comes to portfolio, it's about how deep and how much you're able to build hypothesis and go deep in terms of the problem. Right, so it can be like you can start building a blog. You can try and showcase your work through that. GitHub is another popular one. I also like, for me personally, hackathons are a great way to learn. You can spend a weekend and you can learn so much in a weekend rather than like trying to spend hours learning theoretical aspect of it. So that's a great way to build credibility, especially when you don't have that. Right. Another thing is also about signing up to different organizations. In Singapore, for example, I think I really respect the work that AI Singapore has been doing, and they have a very nice apprenticeship program that allows you to upskill into the AI and also do a real world use case in a company as well. That gives you that the training and certification. That's a beautiful program. Something like that would be great. Even like things on any of the platforms like Udacity, Coursera, you can also use that to learn and build. So when I started, like you expect a university degree to be more valuable, but now even edutech programs are quite valuable, right? So you have that respected by people because they know the amount of effort you have to put in to get that 8 months or 6 months, whatever time you're putting in to build that portfolio. These are great ways to show, right? And it's also about if you're a little ahead in your career, I also recommend this more on mentoring. So something I really believe in as well. So instead of you trying to like build something on your own within a room, you can try to mentor more young people and try and learn from them, like more like a reverse mentoring kind of a view. That really helps you to understand what's happening in the AI space. So I've seen a lot of very good mentoring places in Singapore as well that allow you to do that. That's also a great way to learn in terms of what's up and coming.
Okay. I think any final thoughts on the future of AI in business and how professionals can prepare for it?
Oh, wow. So I think it's going to be quite a big of I sort of still feel that AI has got its hype moment And I think it has still not reached its peak yet. It's in the hype cycle now. It's definitely going up, but it's not reached its peak yet. So you're going to see another 10, 15 years of what's going to happen. But you also have things around like AGI and also expected to really like beat human intelligence coming up as well in the next few years. So in terms of preparation, it's going to be, again, like sort of coming back to what I was saying, being very strong in your domain, something that AI cannot do very easily. You should start thinking like that, right? So I usually think about this as a bit of, I think, recently I also saw Caro's CEO, Aaron Tan, also mentioned this, about how do you disrupt yourself. So think about if you have a knowledge and if you can build something, how can you really disrupt yourself and try and build that, right? And that is what is going to keep you ahead in the market. So you rather disrupt yourself than someone else disrupt you. So if you think about it, so it's better that way. So you know how you're doing this and try and learn along the way as well, right? And it's about a multitude of skills. It's not about one skill anymore. It's about how do you really you can be like a data scientist who works with sales in the morning, who can work with finance in the afternoon, who can work with marketing in the evening, right? You should be able to converse all these different domains, understand all these different domains, and also help them with their problems. Because very rarely some companies are doing that, but very rarely you find one data scientist working in just one function. So they have to be multifunctional and they should have different skill sets around communication, around business framing, around programming and computer science and math, which is like essential. But all the other skills are on integration and software. So it's going to be a multitude of skills. So you have to be constantly learning, constantly innovating, constantly pivoting around what you can do. And that is the recipe for success in the future.
One important thing that I realized you mentioned as well is the ability to work with different business units as well, like earlier you mentioned, marketing, sales, finance. So do you think that communication will be very important? Because historically speaking, software engineers, they are only required to code and not so necessary in terms of communication. Yeah. But increasingly, we've been noticing that communication has been more and more important in the recent job market.
Absolutely. I think in all if you talk to any of my teams, they will tell you that I keep stressing on the fact that it's also not about just communication, it's also about clarity in communication, right? Yeah. So you as a data scientist, if you think about your role in the company, it's about you're dispelling doubts and you're bringing clarity. You're bringing clarity with data, right? And if you think about that, your way you frame and the way you talk becomes very critical in terms of what impact you can make. You can make or break a business as well, right? So if you just hide in a corner building all your models, that's not enough anymore. You have to be able to really translate that into business-centric language into it. Some companies also have a role for this. They call it an analytics translator. So meaning someone who can translate something that is on the business side to the data team, and also on data team, whatever insight you get, you can translate that to the business team, right? But instead of having another person, which is going to be another headcount, you rather be that person in your team to do that. And that's what makes you more well-rounded as a data scientist, right? So in the future, it's going to be like, obviously, the people are using LLMs as well to help explain the models and the insights that you're getting from data. But that's a good start. But that has to, again, be taken and shared by a human. So you're not just going to be reading things. You also need communication and stakeholder management. And that is going to be super important. Yeah.
Sounds fun. But here's another fun question that I've been hearing from the market. Like, let's say you are in your early stages in your career whereby you are only responsible for one particular job requirements as written in the JD. From what you're mentioning, right, a lot of things that you need to be able to adapt and adopt to, you definitely have to perform outside of a JD. How do you think the younger folks within the career talent market, right, will adapt to this kind of mindset?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. The sort of it comes back to what you want from a job, right? So do you think of it as something that you just want to do for a certain period of time in a day and you just finish that and you go back home? Or you think of it as something where you have a career and you want to drive that change, right? And if you're thinking is more on the latter side, then you would take the initiative to do that. So the very few people have initiative and agency, unfortunately, in enterprises to really drive that change, and you can be that person, right? So I've seen a mix of, to be honest, when I've managed people, so I've seen a mix of people who are really super engaged and super initiative and super driven in terms of what they can do, and I've also seen the flip side where they just come and they do what they've been asked to do, and then leave. So it's about how do you be that person who takes initiative and how do you drive that change? Because with AI, it is going to be tough in any company, right? Because one thing with AI is you are not only like trying to move the ladder in terms of where they can do, but you're also ensure that you're taking them along the way, right? So you also want the people in the company to also adopt it, and you also want them to move the needle as well. It's not about you just delivering something and showing that this is working and going away. Right? So given that, it's the ability to take initiative, ability to have that drive, super important. And if I see that in someone, I usually give them and try and empower them as much as possible so that they can take it end to end. Right? And it's very fulfilling, to be honest, to see that. Right? So for you to take something, see that go along the way, along the entire journey, and create that change, that's really fulfilling also for you in terms of what you can do.
But how do you identify them, like during an interview or like a hiring process?
Yeah, I think this is not something that you can do with a few questions. So
Right.
there are obviously certain traits that you can see in their profile that tells you, for example, if someone has taken initiative to learn something new, right? Or someone has done more agency initiative to start something, right? Entrepreneurial skills, for example. And maybe they've learned something in a hard way, either through life's challenges or through sports or other means. Right? So these are things that I usually look for in terms of drive and in terms of entrepreneurial skills. And just because you're running an enterprise doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur, right? So you should have that skill set, that thinking. And you can once you have that thinking and that skill set, then you can definitely drive the change. Okay. And also some things is also demonstrated over time. So you are pushed to different challenges in your company, then you are in a way forced to take initiative, and that can also work. And I've seen people also do the second way as well, where sometimes I end up like really telling them that this is something they have to own and do it, and then you see that they are showing that change that you expect them to see. So it's both ways, to be honest.
Oh, thanks for answering a lot of curious questions that I had. But I think it will be very helpful to share this with the general public as well, because both from a mid-career point of view to early career point of view, right? All these perspectives are very important in navigating how they want to move their career path towards, especially if they want to transit, if they want to accelerate or even start their career. All these insights are very, very insightful for them.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing.
No problem.
Yep. But we've come to the end of all the questions that I have for you. Do you have any closing statements that you want to share about?
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me, Cheryl. And I also feel like it's a great time to be an AI practitioner, right? So the amount of jobs in the market are great. So you rather ride the wave and grow further, and whatever industry you're in, doesn't matter. AI is going to create an impact in your industry. So try and see how you can upskill and learn and grow. And that's what I want to finish with.